Welcome. It has just gone 7 p.m, Wednesday, the 10th of August, and you are watching episode 58 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap, providing an insight on the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode, the Townsville Hydrogen Hub. Part of a fad or the future is my guest, Tracey Holmes. Tracey is the Director of Corporate Services and Hydrogen Advocate for Townsville Enterprise. Born in the UK, Tracey emigrated to Darwin in 2007 before moving to Townsville just 3 weeks prior to Cyclone Yasi. Tracey is a qualified accountant and has experience in strategic planning, project development, and regional development. Prior to working for Townsville Enterprise, Tracey worked for 10 years at the Port of Townsville, looking after project development and future strategic planning. Welcome, Tracey.
Thank you, Bill.
If we can start tonight with, if you can just give us a bit of more information about yourself, why you left the UK to come to Australia is be an interesting topic, and then maybe move on to your role at Townsville Ports, because I'd just like to ask you a few questions in regards to the comparison of Townsville and Cairns.
Okay. Well, for a start, why wouldn't you come to Australia when you live in England with all the rain and the cold? And Australia was always touted as the land of opportunity to Brits like myself. So my husband and I looked into, my husband is actually ex-British Army, and we looked into how we could migrate to Australia to sort of like have a better lifestyle, do all the camping, fishing, and have great weather. So my husband joined the Australian Army, and our first posting was Darwin. So welcome to Australia. So once we left Darwin, we came to Townsville, and I got a temporary accountant job at the Port of Townsville. And then through the 10 years at the port, I moved various different jobs, but it was mainly around project development. So how could we make the port better and stronger? How could we attract more trade? And all the business cases and justification for capital spend that comes along with that. I went from temporary accountant all the way up to manager of strategy and sustainability there until I left a year in July. And I went to work for Townsville Enterprise.
Okay, that one thing about Townsville Port, I mean, it's always been a reasonable port because since its inception, Townsville as a port, it has become a big service hub for the region. And with the railway line running all the way out to Mount Isa, and put in fairly early in the piece, back in the early part of the 20th century. So it's always had that feed from agriculture, and then also the minerals from Mount Isa eventually. So it had a core feed of businesses to it, so that provide the opportunity for it to sort of grow and expand. So besides the natural sort of growth that sort of agriculture or other industries give, what sort of things do you sort of push for to grow it from an internal perspective as a port?
So a lot of the growth areas would be things like containerized freight. So obviously all our goods, whether it be your barbecue from Bunnings or, you know, your vehicles or any goods in the shops, like your Kmarts and that kind of thing, most of that comes in containers. And most of it comes through Brisbane. So it would come through Brisbane, go to depots and warehouses, get sorted, and then get put on trucks and brought up to North Queensland. So the growth area there would be to attract those distribution hubs and sorting hubs, and to then attract regular shipping lines for containers to actually bring the goods here direct for North Queensland and far North Queensland, rather than having it all go to Brisbane. You know, there's a cost factor to it. There's obviously the supply chain. You've got to have those shipping lines coming in on a regular basis, coming and going. Plus, you've also got to have, you know, people. It's all done on per capita, and so the tipping point for the region's population would make it worthwhile for places like Woolworths or Coles to actually bring a distribution centre up here. So we would look at what would be that tipping point where we could actually then go and have talks with distribution centres to say, well, you know, we've got this amount of population. It's going to be cheaper if you bring your goods through here. We introduce them to the shipping lines, they make the deal, and the Port of Townsville grows and the region grows as a result of that.
With the Australian shipping, there's always been a problems with Australian shipping in regards to the using local Australian manned ships and all that sort of on our coastline. It's added a lot of cost in that, and also it sort of stops the using sort of, well, if a ship goes and unloads in Brisbane and it's going to go back to Japan, you would think there might be an opportunity for Coles, Woolworths, Kmart and that to chuck a couple of containers on a ship as it goes past Townsville and throw them out, sort of thing. Is that prevented by the current agreements, and only those sort of things, like if it's come Brisbane to Townsville, it has to come on an Australian ship? Is that a hindrance or?
Yeah, it's more to do with stopping frequencies. So and size of the port, size of the channel. So as we know, you know, vessels getting larger, especially container vessels. They want to get more containers on a vessel because it's cheaper to run that vessel. So ports like Brisbane that can take the really big container vessels tend to get more of the trade because it's cheaper for the shippers to put that container on that vessel that stops at Brisbane and then drive it up to the north than it is to actually put it on a smaller vessel and bring it to the north directly. So there's a cost issue there.
Just a matter of interest, what is the depth of Townsville Port?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily the depth that's the issue, it's the width of the channel. Before the Port Townsville started the channel upgrade project, our channel was 92 metres wide, and that was probably one of the smallest widths in Australia. So the channel upgrade project, which is in progress at the moment, so if you have a look out in the channel, you'll see this big dredge barge dredging the channel. They're widening it, so they're widening it to take in bigger ships. So we'll have 132 metre wide channel, which means rather than only taking sort of 240 metre length ships, we can take up to 320 metre lengths. So because vessels come down the channel, they don't come down straight, they come down at an angle like that.
Just as a matter of interest, have you got any idea what cubic metres of dredging is going to come out in that work? Roughly,
I should know because I was involved in the business case for it, but that was quite a while ago. All I can tell you is that the dredge material that's coming out of the widening will all fit into a 52 hectare area. So we're using all that dredge material to reclaim land. So they've built the rock wall for around about 52 hectares. And now what they're doing with the dredge material is they're lifting it from the ocean floor and they're putting it into that rock wall containment. And so that will give the port another 52 hectares going out into the ocean of land to build on.
Win-win.
Yes, yes.
And it wouldn't happen to be a Dutch company that's got the dredge, has it?
Liebe.
So it's just the Dutch are really good at reclaiming land, and they also did the work down in Port Phillip Bay. Now, Port Phillip Bay was, I think they dredged down. The issue was depth for Port Phillip Bay. They actually took the depth down to, in the whole channel system, down to 46 feet. I don't know what that is in the draft, but it's because I think depth is in meters, isn't it? On boats, it's marked on meters on the side. Yeah. But for some reason, it's 46 feet anyway that they used, and they took out 22 million cubic meters of earth or whatever you're dredging, and they actually dropped it in a basin inside the port. So in Port Phillip Bay, there was actually a natural depression in the bay. So all their fill, all the dredgings was taken to this point and just dropped there. And I think it only took them about 3 or 4 months to complete the job. It was full on. And of course, before the job, of course, we had all the protest groups saying, no, it shouldn't happen because you've got to disturb all this toxic material. But now, I mean, the bay the dolphins are all back. There's actually a reef in there with, I don't know, it's called cold water coral. And the scallop industry is back on track. I mean, that had to stop for a while because of the turning up of the silt and that. But everything's sort of back to in real good shape. So for all the worrywarts who carry on like pork chops about dredging and things like it's going to ruin everything, well, there's plenty of cases to show that even huge jobs, 22 million cubic feet, 22 million cubic meters of soil, doesn't represent the end of the earth.
Well, the difference with this dredging that's been undertaken by the Port of Townsville is they're not using a cutter suction dredge, and they're not disposing of any material at sea. So they're actually using a backhoe. So it's just like a big digger, and it just goes down and grabs the material up and puts it onto the barge. So it's actually what they call best practice dredging, and it was identified during our environmental approvals that this would be the best method to protect, obviously, the Great Barrier Reef and the area around Magnetic Island, and because all the dredge materials coming to land as well, there's no impact to the reef from that dredging. So it's just looking at it differently and not doing the same, utilising the same processes that we used to. It's doing it differently to protect our natural habitat.
What was there any local group that got all upset or worried about it and protested?
There was a lot of consultation, but once the Port of Townsville was extremely transparent about how they were going to go about it, what environmental approvals process they went through. We did a lot of consultation on Magnetic Island because obviously they were a bit concerned that, it may impact their water quality or that kind of thing. But once all that was done, everything was quite amicable, really. And I've personally not seen any protests out anywhere near the bridge at the moment, so I think it's all okay.
I think the difference was with the cans, it was like we wanted to obviously dredge the channel, but they were only talking about 18 inches, you know, like, give us a break, you get a vacuum cleaner and do that. But it ended up costing about 123 million because we had to put it on shore, whereas before it used to be the maintenance dredging used to just be, there was a basin area that used to be dropped, and that had been done many times before. But since everything's got touchy-feely and the reef has become some sort of deity that we've got to keep alive or something, it became really finicky in regards to the conditions and that. And we ended up actually pumping the sludge up to, I think, probably somewhere near Machin or Holloway's, and filled in a big pit there. So a job that would have cost, in a normal situation with being reasonable about things, it probably would have cost somewhere between 20 and 30 million dollars. It ended up costing in the order of 120 million dollars, and was a real big pain in the neck delay in that. And the worst thing about it, we didn't even get any advantage by using that sludge to reclaim land at East Trinity, which was one of the ideas that were floated. So that dredging was, we won nothing basically, because the channel might have got deepened by 18 inches, but you know, that doesn't even last the next generation of cruise liners, let alone cargo ships. So you know, it's just a nothing sort of job.
Yes, yeah. I think the great thing about the port expansion is the beneficial reuse. So the reclaiming of the land and actually being able to expand the port in a environmentally friendly way, but generate that land as well, so then we can expand. And
okay, well, we've talked enough about your former job. Let's talk about your current job and hydrogen. Now with the new government in, and they're full bore on 2050 and looking at all the different opportunities, hydrogen is one of the things that are in the mix, amongst all others. But just before I go forward, I'll just put up a slide from Clean Energy Council and give you an idea of what's going on with hydrogen in just a numbers game. This is all right. I'll share the screen. I don't want that. Stop sharing. I don't want that one. I want this one. This is the Clean Energy Council website. And if you can see that, this is where we're up to. Already, 100 number of Australian hydrogen projects, 103. This is current. Either, though, I think there's 3 completed, a number in planning, and a couple under construction. But the 103 projects on the drawing board, and a total costing of $163 billion. That's a lot of dollars.
Yeah.
So obviously a lot of people are trying to get a share of the future. So how do you think your packaging and your enterprise and the current project for Townsville is going to fare when you got, like, Gladstone is in the mix as well, and you've got Twiggy Forrester down there, and he carries a lot of weight when he's interested in something. So if you can tell us about your project and who's basically carrying the weight or carrying the influence to help make it proceed ahead.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I'll say that the hydrogen task globally is so huge. If if it gets to the commercial stage, the actual demand for hydrogen to replace fossil fuels is so huge that I think that there is more than enough for everybody. So there's, we'll need every area we possibly can to generate this fuel. So as far as Gladstone or South Australia, we all need to be doing it to meet the market. So on that note, Townsville, so North Queensland, we have a hydrogen cluster. It's called NQH2, North Queensland Hydrogen. And we have a group of people who have all come together to basically work together to try and solve the hydrogen task. Because it is a new technology, it's a new industry. I'm sure there are plenty of bumps in the road to get it actually to a commercial state. So we have the cluster, which is a wide cluster. It's got the whole of the supply chain in it, from people who make tanks and pipelines all the way through to end users or producers. And then within that cluster, we have a very tight hub, what we call a hub. And we have 3 hydrogen producers who are in that hub. We have Edify Energy, Origin Energy, and Arc Energy. Arc Energy are a subsidiary of Sun Metals. And also within that hub, we have the Port of Townsville, Townsville City Council, and Copper String as a transmission. And what we're focusing on in the NQH2 cluster is green hydrogen only. So we're not looking at any derivatives to produce hydrogen from gas or coal. We're only looking at producing hydrogen from either solar, wind, or hydro generation power. We're progressing with that. So if I can just share, I will share my screen and I'll show you what NQH2 looks like in this area. Let's share that. So this is what the NQH2 task looks like. So to produce hydrogen, you obviously need your inputs of energy and water, and then your output is hydrogen and oxygen. So in the region, in the North Queensland region, we have various different inputs which will come together. We have a lot of potential for green energy generation going right along that Northwest Minerals Province corridor. We have capability, if we have the transmission of that power, to produce up to about 33 gigawatts of solar and wind generated energy on that corridor. We also have available water, so without actually tapping into any drinking water or water reserves, we have available water from the council's wastewater treatment plants, and then we also have available water from various different dams around the region. And then we have land. The other thing is land. We need land for the producers to build on. So we have the Townsville State Development Area, which is 4,900 hectares of land available. And we also have the Lansdowne Eco-Industrial Precinct, which is 2,200 hectares. And obviously, once hydrogen production gets commercialised, we'll be able to export hydrogen through the Port of Townsville as well. So the region has all the right ingredients, and we do have those particular players in the region that are they're very dedicated to Townsville and North Queensland. So Edify Energy have got a proposal in with the Townsville City Council at the Lansdowne Precinct. And they've got a development application approval in principle to build a pilot hydrogen plant, which would be somewhere in the region of 1 gigawatts, and they would start by supplying domestic market there. The Sun Metals refinery has its own solar farm, and with the subsidiary Arc Energy, they're focusing on production of green hydrogen, initially for domestic market. So Arc Energy have actually just, they've been in talks and they've actually placed orders for 5 hydrogen heavy vehicle trucks to test the hydrogen task on their triple road trains going from Sun Metals to the Port of Townsville. And they're building something called the Sun HQ Hydrogen Hub, which is just outside the refinery's gates, and they'll be producing hydrogen, and it will be a hydrogen refueling depot for the domestic market. So if the council are going to invest in hydrogen bin lorries and that kind of thing, they can fuel there. And then Origin Energy are also looking at putting a production plant on the Lansdowne Eco Precinct, and they're looking at export volumes to Japan with their partner Kawasaki. So hydrogen in the region will start off sort of focusing on the domestic market in order to get that hydrogen production up to a level where it becomes commercial and commercially viable. But all 3 proponents are looking long-term, and they're looking to export. So they're all looking at offtake agreements. Obviously, Arc Energy will export to South Korea to their parent company, Korea Zinc. Origin will export to Japan, and Edify Energy have got some agreements in place with both the Japanese and the Korean people and that the export countries are only looking, they only really want green hydrogen. They can't produce it themselves. They don't have the land mass, or they don't have the right conditions to produce that green energy. So they're looking to places like Australia to actually, meet their fueling tasks, and they can decarbonize themselves.
With hydrogen, we know that there's grey, blue, and green. Actually, I think there's even one worse. I think there's brown hydrogen, and that comes from coal, which is coming out of Victoria at the moment. I think they did ship their first batch to Japan a few months back, but one of the things was that I think the capacity of the ship, I think they only filled it to 25%. I'm not sure what the idea of that was, but it looks like a slow go, and no one really wants hydrogen from brown coal.
No, not at all.
But it was just something that I think it was more aligned along the lines of just testing actual facilities that you need to hold hydrogen and get it on board a ship, and that because it is a rather difficult commodity to sort of move. It's got all its special problems, in regards to the volatility of it, the seepage, its corrosive effect on steel. So there's a massive amount of engineering has to go into just making safe facilities. I do note that there's a big project, and it's been on the drawing board for a long time in West Australia. And that hydrogen project originally under control of a couple of an Australian company, Murchison Hydrogen. And its idea was, and it still is with the current owners, which is I think a Danish company, CIC. And their proposal is they make the hydrogen, but they convert and make ammonia and ship ammonia, which it's still a corrosive, it's still a very corrosive and requires special handling, but it's somewhat less volatile than shipping hydrogen itself. And they're talking about their plant is in the vicinity of 200 No, yeah, 2 million tonnes a year. Now, I think that's pretty substantial, because I think the world's production of ammonia at the moment in 2021 was about 176 million tonne. So 2 million tonne is a reasonable percentage of the whole market. It's not bad for, you know, just one project. So do you think, as things shift along, that those sort of methods might come into the picture as well in the future in Townsville?
I think, to be honest with you, I think the first movers for hydrogen will be green ammonia, because it is a lot easier, as you mentioned. There is an issue around shipping hydrogen, whether it be liquefied hydrogen or whether it be gaseous hydrogen. If it's gaseous, you don't get enough in the vessel to make it work as well, because it's so light. And if it's liquid, it's got to be kept at something like minus 253 degrees centigrade. So it takes a lot of energy to keep it that cold.
And also the vessels holding it have to be awfully strong and weigh a lot as well. So they take a lot of the weight of either the vehicle that's moving it or the ship that's transporting across.
There is another carrier, and you'll have to forgive me because I can never pronounce it. I was never any good at chemistry at school, but the initials are MCH. So this is, again, it's a chemical carrier, and it's based around toluene. So they impregnate the hydrogen into the toluene carrier, and they can ship it. So it's less corrosive or noxious than ammonia, and easier to deal with than hydrogen liquefied. But the market is, so the people that are demanding hydrogen to decarbonize, the Japanese, the Koreans, they want to do as little as possible with it when they get it. Ideally, utopia would be liquid hydrogen, because all they would then have to do is warm it up and put it into their pipelines. So if it's green ammonia or if it's MCH, if it's green ammonia and we're shipping it to Japan, they'll have to crack it at the other end to extract the hydrogen. If it's MCH,
I suppose the difference is with countries like Japan, they just need the hydrogen. Whereas if you ship it to Europe, the demand for fertilizer, or even India and places like that, cracking the ammonia and getting the nitrogen component as into fertilizer, urea, is a plus. So it's a bit of a win-win. Not only do you get the hydrogen, but you can also have your fertilizer industry running at the same time. So you're getting two components in the one shipment.
Yeah. But also, Bill, you've got to, as you probably know, we're not the only people in the world that are really pushing this hydrogen component. The Arab states are really pushing green hydrogen, and obviously Europe, because they're trying to solve two things. Europe, so they're trying to decarbonize, but they're also trying to secure their power source. They can't get gas from Russia anymore, and so they're in quite a rush. So I think for us, initially, we're looking at that Southeast Asia market, and I think, to be honest with you, as I said, I think green ammonia will be the first mover, just because it's not got as many issues to solve as liquefied hydrogen or gaseous hydrogen. So, but all three of our proponents are all looking at the various different carriers. They're not set, it doesn't have to be liquefied hydrogen. They will generate the hydrogen, and then if they make it into green ammonia, or if they make it into, if they put it into MCH carriers, that's fine. They're just concentrated on actually producing that hydrogen at the moment, and they're all in various different stages. But Arc Energy are probably the most advanced, because they're hoping to have their 5 test trucks on the road at the end of Q1 in 2023. So hopefully you'll be able to see hydrogen trucks going up and down the Port Access Road by March next year.
Yeah, we live in hope. Just as a matter of interest, when you make hydrogen by electrolysis and that, you break down water, of course. Now, to produce a kilogram of hydrogen, you need 9 litres of water.
Yeah.
Now, that's a reasonable amount of water per kilogram, especially when you want to produce, say, a million kilograms a year or something like that. So you said you get some water from the treatment plant, but if you use potable water from a dam, then my understanding is it's no longer green. That you can't use existing potable water and call yourself green. Is that the case, or is?
No. Yeah, it would be green. It would obviously it would depend, you know. I mean, how are we getting that water to the area that we're going to produce hydrogen? If it's being pumped, are the pumps being run by coal-fired power stations? That kind of thing. So when you're looking at green, you're looking at the whole supply chain and how you would want the whole supply chain to be green. But certainly,
I think that was one of the
yeah.
I think that was one of the things about Murchison and its project in West Australia. They're actually building a desal plants in the first place to demineralise the seawater, and that gave them big green credentials in that they were using desalinated water. But I mean, that's another electricity input you need to convert salt water to fresh water, is a big energy input. And then you've got a big energy input to make the hydrogen. So you're sort of talking about, well, how big are these solar and wind farms going to be? So in Townsville, for instance, you're hoping that the backbone of CopperString will provide the feed in for wind farms all the way, say, from here to Mount Isa?
Yeah, definitely. I think we need some form of transmission from that area into the coast, and CopperString seems to be the project that's most advanced. The CSIRO and Transgrid did a study for the New South Wales government not that long ago, and they looked at the whole of Australia, and they looked where the best solar and wind resources were in Australia, and we actually came out on top. So the whole region from Townsville all the way through the Northwest Minerals Province has got, Hewendon's got the best wind in Australia. And that whole area has got really, really high solar potential. So us in Newcastle, believe it or not, so Newcastle and the Hunter Valley were also very good. So the projects which we're talking to people about and proponents about of the green energy, they're all looking out that way, but they don't, they will need transmission. So they will need the CopperString to bring that energy into the production areas, which will be in and around Townsville.
To make it a commercial successful hub, what sort of volume of hydrogen would we be talking about? A kilogram's a kilogram, well, a ton's a ton. How many tons do we need to sort of say, well, we're in the really commercialized market sort of thing?
I think it's a bit of a chicken and an egg situation in that, all studies seem to suggest that somewhere the production of hydrogen needs to cost somewhere around the $3 a kilogram to produce. So that's all your inputs and your output would cost $3 a kilo. And then hydrogen would be commercially viable. So in order to get that, all this capital investment, electrolyzers aren't cheap, land investment, pipelines, common user facilities, storage areas, export facilities, berths, ships. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a while to get that, dollar per kilo down, the production dollar per kilo down. But talking to our proponents, they're looking at sort of, their trial projects are only looking at very, very small tonnages of hydrogen, about one of the projects was looking at a trial project of 36,000 tonnes per annum production. And to be honest, that only scratches the surface.
Well, that's not much of a return.
No.
If you're only getting $3 or $4 a kilo for it.
But ramping up, so the hydrogen task and the forecast and the demand, we're looking at somewhere between 400,000 tonnes and 700,000 tonnes of export per annum. That's when it's really commercially, if that's so commercially viable, it's a $5 billion export industry.
In regards to the production of the hydrogen, can, like, the sun doesn't shine at night and the wind doesn't always blow, can the production of hydrogen sort of cope with that? Can you sort of run an electrolyzer today and then the power goes on and off and it doesn't worry it? Like if you're smelting aluminium and your power went off, well, that's the end of your whole operation. That solidifies in your pipes and in the furnace, and it's just finished. So is hydrogen manufacturing able to cope with that intermittent production?
No. So look, green hydrogen production would have to have a levelisser. So you'd have to have backup batteries, you'd have to have hydro power or something to actually have that 24/7 green energy input into your plant. If you're producing hydrogen and you're liquefying that hydrogen, that's got to be kept at that temperature constantly, or else it just then becomes gaseous. And if it's in a pipe and it's in the pipe being piped as liquid, it's got to be kept at the minus 253 degrees because that pipe is built for liquid. It's not built for gas. So if it turns gaseous, that pipe may not be, up to safety standards for gaseous hydrogen. It's built.
Okay. That puts us in the same problem in regards to what we've got with our normal electricity supply. The expectation is we want it 24/7. We want as much as we want, and if we don't want it, we just don't. That's the generator's problem. Now, if there's a power requirement for a hydrogen plant in Townsville, and it's got to be supplied with, say, just a 1 gigawatt plant, and it's got to be 24/7. The operation is 24/7, 165 days a year. It wants a gigawatt, and it wants it every gigawatt hour, every hour, continuously. So now, when you're obviously a little bit aware in regards to the scale of renewables you'd have to install to guarantee that gigawatt is there 24/7, 365 days a week.
Yes.
So that's going to talk about how many wind turbines, how much land we got to get, basically the trade-off between a solar generator getting some share of supply versus a wind. So people don't invest without ensuring they got a return. So they need to ensure that they can get it, they put in the capital cost for the wind turbines, the solar farm, they have to get a minimum sort of return. Now, if they've got to give you a gigawatt, they have to build something like 4 gigawatts of nameplated power generation to sort of supply that, and probably add battery backups. So how do you get these generators to share in making sure that 1 gigawatts and get a fair return for themselves? Because not all the time, not all their power would be needed at times.
Yeah. Look, the producers that we've got in our consortium are generators as well. Mm. So Edify Energy have solar farms, and Arc Energy have wind farms and solar farms. And so what they're doing is, with their trial plants, they're working out how they can satisfy that need, so that, you know, 1 gigawatt an hour, every hour, 365 days a year. And then talking to the other producers. So, you know, we've got Wind Lab in the process of producing a project up near Mount Fox for wind turbines. So that, between the producers and the generators, that's when they basically make their commercial arrangements, shall we say. And that's not something we have a part in. We just introduce them, and, you know, they go away and negotiate and make those commercial arrangements. And
well, the thing is, what's got to happen is, I mean, at the moment, wind and solar powers can basically get the share of the market by the government just tells the coal producer to shut down his coal production, and all the sales go to the wind and solar. Now, yeah, that situation is not going to be there in this instance. So the suppliers of the renewable energy will have to make sure that they provide the necessary backup and capacity to ensure that they get that 1 gigawatt there continuously. So I think that's got to be a challenge in regards to, well, how, because no one wants to overspend, overcapitalize. You want to put in the minimum amount of turbines and the minimum amount of solar panels to make sure you can do it. Anything else is just an added capital cost that, you know, you're not getting any return on.
Yes, yeah. And look, I mean, that's probably for bigger brains than mine. These guys, they're looking at things like microgrids and having self-contained energy inputs and that kind of thing. So they're working with Ergon and PowerLink, and then they're working with the producers and the proponents to map out what their investment would look like and whether it's commercially viable for them to do that. So that's, yeah, for me, I don't know the particulars of those you know, agreements or thought processes. I just know that we have quite a lot of varied investors wanting to build green energy in our region, and they're all chomping at the bit to do it. So there must be a really good market for it.
Well, I hope it is a good commercial sort of decision in that. And I just the main thing I want is no taxpayers' money. I'm just over taxpayers stumping up money either as grants, guaranteed feed-in tariffs, or some other thing. I think it's every dollar we send that way is less money for hospitals, less money for schools, less money for aged care. Every grant for everything, you know, is money not directed to public good and public welfare. It goes to some commercial operation. And I think it's going to be, we're a little bit thin if we go forward and it's one grant after another and another, because ARENA is handing out taxpayers' money for a lot of renewable projects, and the money is mounting, and it's been mounting for years. And like I say, everything that goes out in a grant to either individual, whether it's your solar on your roof, or to a company, is taxpayers' money that is not going into roads, our infrastructure, our hospitals and that. So hopefully in the near future, the commercial realisation of these sort of things will be there, and they'll carry themselves.
Look, I think definitely the solar is there. The commercialisation of that is there. As NQH2, we've just produced collateral to attract private investment into the region for these things. So for the green energy generation, for hydrogen generation, for the common user infrastructure, we understand that we need, private investment for that. We all know the government doesn't have a bottomless pit of treasure. But private investment attraction is really important to get that whole commercialization of the industry going anyway. So the big super funds and those kind of investors are really looking at this because it's meeting all their targets. So it's, investment principle, it's going to give them a return. It's meeting their ESG targets. They're seen as a responsible investor. It ticks all the boxes.
I think the interesting things about super funds is it's not Australian super funds are not in the game at all in general compared to people like Canada. A lot of their super funds are actually in Australia into these sort of things as well. So it's quite interesting that Australian super funds seem to be lagging in a lot of areas of investment in Australia, whereas I think Canada is a big player with its super funds, and now the Danish that CIC has a lot of hookups with superannuation in Europe, and so we'll probably see those superannuations come into the game long before we get Australian super funds sort of into the picture on a reasonable scale, because they've always been a bit aligned to bricks and mortar and building shopping centres, office blocks and things like that, and even offshore investment. So hopefully, if there's money to be made, hopefully the Australian super industry opens its eyes in the future.
I think they are, and I think we've had interest, shall we say, inquiries, and I think they're realizing that actually, because Australian super funds also have boxes to tick. They also have to be responsible investors. The global consensus is that climate change is a thing. We have polar opposites where somebody won't believe in climate change, somebody is a major activist, but generally, globally, we know we need to do something. We don't have an endless resource of coal and oil and super fund investment, especially the Australian super fund investment, they're starting to realise that the people that are giving them their money, the super inputters, want that responsible investment. They want that, environmentally sound investment now. So I don't think it'll be long before they come to the party.
Just on that point, you pointed out we haven't got endless coal and oil and stuff like that. Well, in actual fact, we've got about 700 years of coal deposits worldwide, and we've probably got, with shale and that, we've probably got 300 or 400 years as well. But a lot of people aren't talking about, as the renewables really gears up, the demand for natural resources for renewables, the cobalt, the copper, the lithium, your tonnage rates are going to go through the roof. Not just with renewables, but then if you move into electric cars, all that's got to add up. And we're talking about, well, we want to save the environment from plant food, but what happens, when people start actually, because you're an accountant, so you should have a bit of an idea with figures and that and have an interest. So all of a sudden we need so many tens of thousands of tons of copper each year in addition to what we've currently got. And that's got to grow as more and more turbines and come online. We're going to need more coal power. Now, so we've got to go and dig some more holes, whether they're in Africa, Australia, or whatever. So there's got to be a huge mining and exploration requirement as we go forward. And then the other thing that's got to happen is, the other thing on the environment is we're going to, and it's fortunate for Australia, we have got a massive land mass. And I know a lot of people love the country and so it's all beautiful and that. But gee, I've been out across the Nullarbor. I've been out to Mount Isa and through the centre and things like that. Gee, there's a lot of land that I'd gladly let someone else. You can have that without any problems and make it useful. So we're in that fortunate position. We've got land mass, but it's still going to be massive numbers of turbines and that, and they're all going to be imported. There's nothing in the renewable energies that we basically make, really. So it's all money that's going out outside. So we need to make sure when we import those things that they're going to actually generate a revenue for us. And I don't just mean for the companies, but Australia-wide. Yeah.
Look, Australia is looking at producing solar themselves. There are a couple of companies in Australia that are actually looking at generating that. The turbines, they're a bit different. But I guess if I take a philosophical look at this, how far we've come in such a short period of time. So how much more can we invent? How much more can we make better? So when we say we need all this land for solar or the turbines and we need all these minerals and everything, only until the next thing. So only until we find something else and we invent something else and life marches on and technology marches on. So I think we're just at the start of this journey and it's quite scary what we don't know yet.
I think that's another thing is that we're going down this path of all these renewables and hydrogen and that, but it could be something come onto the market or gets pushed along and completely overtakes it. And those things with people like Elon Musk, who suddenly just comes up with some whiz-bang idea and within a short time it's actually out there in our real world, from his imagination to the real world. He seems to get it there pretty good, from his SpaceX and all those. How long ago were we never even thought of reusable rockets, actually send them up and they come back and land on the ground, and reuse them again. That's his brainchild, and he got it from up here to on the drawing board and then used within, I think it's less than 10 years that he's managed to do that. So there's always the potential for something to come along and just, gee, we're going down that pathway and someone just comes and bowls us over and we don't need that anymore. We've got something else. So there's all those sort of risks, aren't there?
Yes. Oh, there are, but there's all those sort of risks with anything new. And, hydrogen is new, even though hydrogen's been around for a long time and it is being used. It's been used globally. NASA's been using it for years, and, we've been using ammonia for years. But the actual industry itself is new. And with any new industry, there is always a risk.
Well, the thing is, you've got to be in it to win it.
You do.
Yeah, and if you go to sit on the sideline, you might get in late, but the thing is, well, everyone else has got the runs on the board. They've made the big profits, and you're just picking up the crumbs, sort of thing. So you don't want to be that situation. But the other thing that sort of is got me sort of a little bit concerned that there's so many different projects and and so many different interests. We don't want some sort of internal competition that drags some people back and other people ahead, sort of thing. So it'd be good if it was a little bit more coordinated. I did listen to Mr. Albanese earlier on last week, and he was talking about an offshore wind farm for here and an offshore wind farm for here, and South Australia and Victoria and this. Like it's just getting thrown around confetti. We've got to have renewable this over there and there. It's concerning when it doesn't seem to be a central plan strategy. If it's just something that's going to evolve in some sort of uncontrolled way, to my way of thinking.
I think, to be honest, if you actually look at the players around Australia in these projects which are on the go, there are core players at the back of this, at the back of all the projects. So, when we lose, you said there was 103 projects, there may be 103 projects, but out of those 103 projects, I think you'll find that at least a third of those projects have the same players. So what Origin are doing up in Townsville, they're replicating in Gladstone, they're replicating in Newcastle, and they're replicating. So there's 5 projects, say. I don't know whether Origin's got 5 projects, but let's say they've got 5 projects. They may be in different areas, but they'll be classed as 5 separate projects, but really they're one proponent doing the same thing, just in a different area. So I think when you actually do a deep dive into those projects and what they are and who they are, I think you'll see that a lot of them are extremely similar or have the same players in them. So for me, it doesn't seem that scary that there's 103. I think there should be 503, because I think there's enough demand out there for Australia to really make it a very good industry.
In regards to the Townsville hub, what milestones are you looking to, like, and have you got a measure and these milestones are sort of identified, and when you get there you can tick them off and you can keep progressing, and you know that the thing's moving forward properly. So can you give us an idea of who runs the different milestones and who coordinates it or has an overview?
So, well, the sort of milestones are sort of kept in the hub. So there are producers that kind of run that. So our first milestone will be the hydrogen truck trials in Q1 of next year. The next milestone there would be probably the pilot plant from Edify. So that would then come online after that. So Arc Energy will have their refueling station, even though it will be pilot, so it'll be quite small, but they'll have it enough to, test these trucks. And then Edify will do their pilot plant. And Origin will do their pilot plant. And then the next big milestone from the pilot plants coming up is actually building that up into first exports out of the Port of Townsville. But in between there, you've got that domestic market being built as well. So, we want people to order hydrogen garbage trucks, and we want people to, because we'll be producing that domestic.
I think there's a big seminar in September in Singapore on hydrogen. I'm not sure if you're aware of that one.
Yeah, look, hydrogen seminars have been popping up to a penny at the moment. It's a really topical subject, shall we say. I'm actually in Brisbane at a Hydrogen Connect Summit at the beginning of September. So hopefully, yeah.
In regards to Townsville Enterprises, I presume there's similar sort of things. Maybe, I mean, I've never heard of Gladstone Enterprises. I mean, maybe they're still just on a Chamber of Commerce system. I don't know. But would there be chatter between different local governments that are involved in this, so they can keep tabs on each other and see what the go is? And
yeah, so that's
friendly, of course, friendly, not covert or anything like that.
Look, NERA, who we're a designated cluster under, they have several clusters around the country, and every month we get together and we share our challenges and our kicking goals. So Gladstone's part of that NERA cluster. South Australia, Western Australia, Tasmania, they've all got clusters, and we all get together once a month via Teams and virtually meet, and we discuss our challenges and what issues we've got in our area, whether that's skills training for the hydrogen industry or anything like that. And we learn from each other. So we share our ideas, our thoughts, our challenges. And it may be that, Townsville's got a particular issue with getting some skills training sorted with TAFE. And it may be that South Australia have already done that and they've got modules that they can share with our TAFE up here. So there's a lot of collaboration nationally between the clusters to bring this hydrogen industry, to a national level. It's going to have to be national.
And I suppose we just have to go through the growing pains of it. And we're probably looking 5 years before we see anything, returns. Would that be sort of
commerciality would be around about 5 years. Obviously everybody would like it sooner because everybody wants to earn a buck, but these things take time, and infrastructure takes time as well. So that it's going to be about 5 years before there will be some returns on this. But the first movers, the Arc Energies and the Edifies and the Origins of our region, they are first movers, and they're willing to accept that bit of pain to get that industry off the ground.
I think the good thing about ARC is it's an internal operation in Sun Metals, and it's got a overseas parent company that's backing it and also wants to be a user. So it's sort of got that internal drive to make it happen, sort of thing. So that's an interesting part of the project, and so it's not completely reliant on outside players. It's got its own sort of drive mechanism to go forward.
Yes, yeah, and that's great for our region, because if they get up and running, then that will drive the hydrogen industry in our region, and it will bring in other players, and they'll see the commercial value in that. So Arc Energy and Sun Metals are definitely the sort of like the leaders of the gang in North Queensland.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is too, then Sun Metals says, we're selling you zinc and it's green zinc, well, then that gives it a much bigger market, sort of thing, and say, well, a lot of people will chase that because it's got that certification.
Yes.
So that gives it its advantage. So it's there in two ways, not just the hydrogen, but then if the other products that it's engaged in, being green, just makes it that much more marketable and added value.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, Tracey, look, we've gone over the hour, so I'd like to wrap it up here. If you just got any last comments in regards to, are you going to be overworked and underpaid for the next 5 years?
Always. But it's
there
for
could
the
always
benefit
be.
of the region. So, you know, we're happy
Oh,
to do that.
you'll carry the load. But there again, you know, maybe in 5 years' time there'll be some major strategic job amongst one of these hydrogen companies that might want to string you a bonus to come aboard.
Maybe, you never know. Always open to offers.
Okay, we'll wind it up there. But if you just stay on the line, please, and we'll just have a little chat after.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks very much for your time. It's been really enjoyable. If you enjoyed tonight's show, please like, share, and subscribe to our Facebook page. Also, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now, next week, my guest will be Helen Dalton. Helen Dalton is the member for Murray in New South Wales. New South Wales is having a state election next year. I think it's in about March. Now, with the interest with the Murray area has always been the Murray-Darling Basin and the feeds in. So last year we had a chat with Jennifer Morosi in regards to the water flows that out of the Murray and the Darling into South Australia and the demands that are there. And we also had a chat with Chris Brooks, the chairman of the Southern Riverina Irrigation Corporation, and the problems that they were having in getting their fair share of water. So this is just another step in regards to getting a bit more understanding as we go forward into an election year for New South Wales, what the cry is for water in southern New South Wales versus the northern reaches. And Helen is right in the midst of that fight between the north and the south in New South Wales. So please join us next week. Thank you.